and welcome to this podcast about sustainable risk management. My name is Caroline, and with me today in the podcast studio, I have the pleasure of talking to our risk engineer from the UK, James Morrell. First, James, can I ask you to tell a bit about your role in IF?
Yes, hello, Caroline. My name, as I say, is James Morrell. I've been working for IF for the last 4 to 5 years, and my role is to service the business that we write out of the Nordics and the local businesses that are based in the UK. So that's me.
On to the first question, that is, how does risk engineering connect with sustainable business practices?
Yes, good question. So first of all, what is sustainability or business sustainability? So in my mind, it's the coordination of the environmental, social and financial demands and to ensure that it is responsible, ethical and an ongoing success. So ultimately, if a business stays in business, then it's sustainable. Now, the key physical loss driver to commercial and industrial property is fire. And the Fire Sector Federation, which is a UK-based board, has recently estimated that the total economic cost of fire annually is £9 billion for the UK alone. So it's for that reason, as you can understand, the reason why a risk engineer focuses not solely, but mainly on fire or preventing fires. So if a business burns to the ground, then ultimately it is not very sustainable. It impacts on productivity, supply chain, and the local community. And the single biggest attributing factor for preventing a fire is with the installation of sprinklers. And I think it's fair to say that the risk engineer is probably one of the biggest advocates of the sprinkler system. So fitting sprinklers protects businesses in the long run, and it protects them from the £2.6 million daily loss for the UK. Sprinklers protect the environment by avoiding wasted materials, pollutants such as CO2 emissions, and excess fire and rescue service water use. They protect the social demands by keeping the business in business and hence providing jobs and thus supporting the community. And it's worth saying as well that fire and rescue service water, so I'm talking about the sort of hose streams that they use to contain or put out a fire, becomes sort of severely contaminated, and it can kill aquatic life over several kilometres. Sprinklers reduce greenhouse gases by 97.8%, or so the industry says, by limiting the area of damage that's affected by the fire. And I think it's worth just saying as well that in Hollywood, sprinklers are characterised by activating over a large area and causing extensive water damage, but that simply isn't the case. Sprinklers will only activate over the source of the heat. So typically, a fire can be controlled by 2 to 3 to 4 sprinkler heads.
Do you have any examples of how fire safety improve a business resilience?
Well, funny you should ask that, but yes, I do actually. In February 2020 in the UK, 140 firefighters were called to attend a bakery fire in the north of England, which wasn't sprinklered. Now, typically bakers are made of combustible or plastic insulated panels. When you combine that with a heat source, so be it an industrial oven or a prover, typically the industry does suffer from pretty large fires. And in this case, up to 75% of the ground floor was extensively damaged by fire. And the company, rather than rebuild the factory in the same spot, they diverted their operations to other bakeries within the group. So the site was not rebuilt, and there was a loss of 100 jobs. And it's worth saying that socially and economically and environmentally, the business was impacted and in the local community as well. So you could say that wasn't very sustainable. Now, in contrast to that, there was a fire in October in 2020 at a distribution warehouse in the south of England, which was fully sprinkler protected. And as a result of that, there was minimal damage and the depot was functioning again. And it's worth saying that when you have this instances, it's effectively a non-event and business returns to normal relatively quickly, which is why they're generally not reportable because it is such a non-event.
What is the environmental impact of a fire?
Well, all fires create environmental impacts, including needless carbon emissions. And just as an example, I mean, we're seeing more and more wildfires these days due to climate change and global warming. But wildfires emit up to 1.76 billion tonnes of carbon globally, which is double Germany's annual carbon emissions. So it is very significant. Now, they require vast amounts of water, fires in general, that is. So more than 9 billion litres of water was used by the fire brigade annually. So as you can see, it is significant. They create unnecessary waste and use of resources, as many buildings have to be demolished and rebuilt. So fires in business buildings without sprinklers emit more than 350,000 tonnes of CO2 each year, which is the equivalent of 140,000 cars. And another example, Buncefield, which was a major fire at an oil storage facility, it was still causing environmental issues 12 years after the event.
Is it only sprinklers that drive sustainability and risk engineering?
No, it's not. Whilst it is a key component, and as I say, we are big advocates of the use of them, a risk engineer will also focus on other human element practices, such as hot work management, internal inspections, housekeeping, control of combustible dust, practices surrounding flammable liquid handling, burner safety management, arson, etc., etc. The list goes on and on. So, for example, back to a food factory, they use industrial ovens, so we look at combustion safeguard controls, maintenance, housekeeping, operator training, construction, all effectively to limit the risk of fire and to mitigate it on that piece of industrial equipment. Another pertinent issue at the moment is energy prices, which are increasing substantially. And clients are having to invest in alternative sources of energy, such as roof-mounted PV panels or photovoltaic panels. These themselves create a fire risk, so we have seen some relatively large fires in the industry. And we're having to adapt and work out best practices to prevent roof fires.
Does sustainability only relate to fire in risk engineering?
No, there are other areas a risk engineer will look at. How a client is affected by natural hazards. So, for example, earthquakes, storms or floods can devastate a client's business, leading to property damage and business interruption. So we look at a client's resilience to each, such as roof bracing for windstorm, or another example, storage racking design for earthquake, etc., etc. But one of the biggest of these natural hazards is undoubtedly going to be the impact of flooding. It is itself linked to climate change, and it can severely affect a business's operation. An example would be a business biscuit factory based in the north of England, which flooded after the extensive floods we saw in 2015. And effectively put out biscuit production at one of the largest biscuit factories for about 6 months. And there was extensive property damage and ultimately business interruption that went with it. So it can be particularly severe. So a risk engineer will assess a site in flood-exposed locations, and they will develop a plan with our clients, which may involve localized protection. And we'll also look at planning as well, what can be done to sort of improve the resilience during and post-flood.
What are some of the current issues surrounding sustainability and risk engineering?
Well, it's a good question, that. At the moment, risk engineering and sustainability do not particularly well align. There is a need to consider the overall sustainability of the built environment, not just, for example, looking at materials selected. For example, fire compartments, which a risk engineer will recommend, counters the free-flowing buildings which benefit heating or cooling. And another example means sustainable construction materials generally means it's combustible, such as wood, the use of wood or cross-laminate timbers or plastic insulation, which are very good at thermally insulating a building, but they're also combustible. Another example, the impact of fire is not really considered in terms of sustainability rating schemes. As I say, an example was there was a laboratory built in Nottingham in the north of England, which was carbon neutral. It was made from timber construction, and it was prized for sustainability credits. Now, a fire right at the end of the construction phase tore through the building, and basically the entire building was lost, and it was rebuilt afterwards without increase in fire resilience or any active fire protection. Now, that building won Sustainability Project of the Year award at the annual building awards, which sort of contrasts the sustainability that we're trying to advocate. So finally, it's worth saying, if risk engineering is having to adapt to the current demands our clients are facing to be more sustainable, And it is this flexible approach which should ultimately leave our clients in a better position, both from a business resilience and a sustainability standpoint.
Thank you, James, for participating in this podcast.
Yeah, very nice to talk to you, Caroline.